Hi, everyone. My name is Chip Paul with New Pharma. I'm the chief innovator here at New Pharma. And this will be the third in our blog series. The first blog that we did was really a restatement of our model of human function here at New Pharma. The second blog was probably a little bit difficult to get through. So it's about your immune system and kind of how your immune system works. These next two blogs, actually, so blog 3 and blog 4, we're going to dive into disease states and a little bit more potentially about what's wrong with us and how we're being impacted by our diet and environment, to put it more specifically. So in this one, we're going to talk a little bit more about environment, but we're going to talk about disease states and oxidative stress. Okay, so how do diseases happen? What is oxidative stress? Let's explore these important topics, shall we? So here we go. So again, let's just a recap of what the New Pharma model of human function is. Again, this is kind of important to know because this is the basis, I would say, for all of our findings, how we deconstruct disease states. And how we reconstruct potential solutions to help with those disease states. So again, in our minds, you work through 4 major systems. One of those is the spiritual system. We'll leave that to the viewer. The other 3 are very physical systems. So we have a fat-based system that we'll talk about real quick. We have an endocannabinoid system, which regulates us. We have a bacterial system, which kind of balances them all. And they have crosstalk between the systems through ancient neuroreceptors called FFARs and PPARs. So let's dive into this a little bit. So the endocannabinoid system, what is that? Well, again, this is a system that's super duper old. So we developed it when we went from invertebrate to a vertebrate. So yes, it is indeed that old. And it is that important. So about the time we had a tail and a spine, we needed to begin to start managing and regulating things. So we developed a management and regulation system, which is called our endocannabinoid system. But you have to go all the way back to a sea squirt to find the guy that we developed that in. And he was the guy where we went from an invertebrate to a vertebrate. You will also find the endocannabinoid system in most life on the planet. It's extremely common. In fact, insects are the only major group that does not have an endocannabinoid system, but even some of them do. Insects that bite you like a tick will have a rudimentary endocannabinoid system in their mouth, so as probably not to invoke an immune response from you, since the endocannabinoid system is involved in our immune response. Isn't that cool? Anyway, point 1 about the endocannabinoid system is that it's old and ancient. Point 2 about it is it's looking to be our master regulatory system. Again, satisfy yourself, NIH.gov. There's hundreds of thousands of studies. All of them would indicate that it is a regulatory system and does regulate that particular area that they're looking at. Again, you can go back to our model and we dive into this a little bit more deeply in that first blog 1 video. Point 3 about the endocannabinoid system, best part is it's driven and fed by natural resources. So again, we have to feed this system just like a deer, just like a cat, just like a bird, just like a fish. And none of them use cannabis, which is what everybody seems to associate the system with. So again, it has to be fed. It has to be fed through natural processes. So the second, well, really the kind of the first system that we had, even before we had an endocannabinoid system, we had to have a system to feed it, right? So it turns out we had this system in the sea squirt, but we had a fat-based system, a system where we store energy and chemical mediators for future use. And we do this on something called a triglyceride. A triglyceride consists of saturated fat, monounsaturated fat, and polyunsaturated fatty acids. Only polyunsaturated fatty acids are essential, meaning your body can't make them. Again, you will stick on a triglyceride whatever you put in your maw, in your mouth. So if you're eating a bunch of saturated fat and 0 polyunsaturated fats, you will have triglycerides made up of a lot of saturated fat and no polyunsaturated fat. And that is not a good thing, boys and girls. We have to have, they're essential. We got to eat them. Omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. We're going to talk a lot about them. They're important. Anyway, so this fat-based system, it turns out what happens is all these fatty acids go on a triglyceride. And then what you do is you metabolize them. So it turns out these giant long things make really good precursors for a bunch of smaller other things. So an example of this would be saturated fat, which you pull into a cell based on enzymes. Enzymes are what come from RNA, DNA expression. So you express enzymes, which are like scissors, and they cut up that longer chain precursor and make other things from it. Okay. So saturated fat, one of the breakdowns of saturated fat is something called cholesterol. We all know a lot about cholesterol. One of the breakdowns of cholesterol is estrogen. Another of the breakdowns of cholesterol is testosterone. In fact, all of your sex hormones come from cholesterol, believe it or not. And the other thing that we all have heard a lot about lately that we all seem to be deficient in is vitamin D. So again, if you're deficient in vitamin D, that potentially could indicate you're deficient in cholesterol, which could indicate that you're deficient in saturated fat. We all kind of quit eating saturated fat a while. McDonald's, by the way, is not saturated fat. It's far worse, which you can look at the next blog and I'll tell you about that. But it's not saturated fat. Those are trans fats. And again, those are, they do things to you, which can be good, can be bad. Let's put it that way. All right. So all the fats, every single fat that you can stick on a triglyceride will feed the endocannabinoid system within one enzyme step. That means one little blick DNA and one little cut will build an endocannabinoid enzyme, chemical mediator. So from saturated fats, we build something called PEAs. PEAs are responsible for inflammatory mediation, kind of that have to do with our digestive. They're not real well studied yet, just kind of studied. From monounsaturated fatty acids, we build something called OEA, oleomide, responsible for our circadian rhythm. Absolutely. Is a modulator of something, our PPAR neuroreceptors, if you'll remember right at the first slide. So very important endocannabinoid. Polyunsaturated fats, the only two types of fats you gotta have, omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids, they build your main endocannabinoid. So it's actually omega-6s build something called anandamide and something called 2-AG that are our main endocannabinoids and help us basically manage and fuel our body. Omega-3 fatty acids really build more anti-inflammatories, so that the things that help us deflame, if you will, or manage our inflammation. And again, all these little critters probably eventually will be called endocannabinoids because they're regulatory molecules. All right, so the third physical system that you have is a bacterial system. This bacterial system runs on carbohydrates, sugars, and fibrates. So non-digestible fibers is what these guys eat, but it's basically bacteria that grows in our guts that is responsible for all the chemicals we need to run our mind. So everything we need to physically regulate our body comes through the fat-based system. Everything we need to run our mental status and cognition comes through these bacterial processes from our gut. Used to be thought that we had to eat basically for essential amino acids. So 9 essential amino acids, I believe there are now. Used to be thought that we had to eat for them. It's now looking like, for the most part, we make these things in our guts, provided that we have the right kind of bacteria. Now, we may still have to eat some. It just depends. But again, we make this stuff, which is cool. And we make it from stuff that we eat, which again is the same as needing to eat it, kind of, as long as you know what you're doing. Okay. All right. So again, those are the 3 systems. You have a fat-based system, which is probably the oldest system. And, we should run on fats that feeds the endocannabinoid system. Then you kind of have the sugar-based system or bacterial system that picks up the slack. So again, it's going to make the things we need to run our mind, which are not really critical for survival. It's more our body stuff, right? But stuff we need to run our mind. And again, it's going to kind of balance any defects that we might have in the fat-based system, which is cool. So you can make things called glucosteroids, right? That will modulate you, estrogen and testosterone wise, glucohormones, right? So you can make these things from sugars. Those are made in the gut. They're not made from fats the way that you would normally make some of these things. So anyway, There you go. All right. So why does this matter? Well, let's have a quick discussion about genetics. Okay. So, and the point here is, again, we're super duper influenceable, right? We are influenced every time we take a breath in our genetics, but we're very resilient. So again, we're highly influenceable, highly configurable, if you will, but we're very resilient in our health. And so let me illustrate this with a quick point. So let's say we decide to go on a walk and we're walking down the street. And as we're walking down the street, we walk over a lead mine. Oh no, we don't know it. We're just talking, we're chatting, we're having a good time. First time we take a breath, our bodies know it, because we will sense the lead in our respiratory system through something called our TRP channel. As soon as we sense the lead, we will begin to make immediate genetic changes. So we'll start turning on all of this genetic machinery that defends ourselves against, foreign xenobiotics, that defends us against DNA damage. Certain genes will turn on. Oxidative stress genes will turn on. So we'll start turning on all this defensive machinery. And guess what? When we start turning on that machinery, we'll start pulling resources. In order to do things, metabolize, you need certain things. You need oxygen, you need metals, you need ions. Basically, you need cofactors to be able to metabolize. Again, there's a limited resource of those things. If you turn on all this machinery over here, you're starting to suck resources. But we don't know it. We're just walking down the road, having a chat. Again, we walk off the lead mine. Our respiratories begin to sense the lack of lead and make the necessary changes. All these genetics turn off. All these cofactors go back to the work that they were doing over here. That happens to you every single time you take a breath. You are making genetic changes in your body. That's how variable we are. And we should be, because we have to respond to our environment, right? So again, we're very adaptable. We change all the time, and that's as we should be. So based on our environment, all the time, we're making genetic changes. So you're born with something called a phenotype. It's like a, let's say, shadow, but you constantly are changing that shadow and that expression of a shadow. Now, if things go wrong, you might break, along certain patterns based on that shadow. But again, you're constantly changing all the time as to your genetics. Now, isn't that cool? Because again, if you're responsive to your environment, can that mean that we can create an environment that you respond to? Ha! That's the cool stuff, boys and girls. So that's where all this is going. And isn't that neat? Okay, so what's a disease? Well, a disease is a particular abnormal condition that negatively affects the structure or function of all or part of an organism. And that is not due to any immediate external injury. Okay? We don't think about this very much, but what is a disease? I mean, it's just a dysregulation. It might be a persistent infection. It might be a lot of different things, but it's something that's causing dysbiosis, dysregulation in that organism. It's something that, I have a mobile example in a second, so I won't use that one yet. Okay, so anyway, let's talk about our immune system real quick. So how do we defend ourselves against stuff? Well, we've got an exoskeleton, right? So we got something protecting all of our internal organs and all this. We got skin. And so our skin protects us from our environment. Our skin protects us from extreme temperatures. Our skin does a whole lot of things. It protects us from bacteria, from viruses, from parasites. We have to oxygenate. So we have a respiratory system. Again, we have defenses in our respiratory system to protect us from things invading our respiratory. And we have basically a digestion system. Again, we have to take in nutrients. We have to deal with nutrients. So those are ways that things can get in our body. But we've got defenses in those particular mechanisms. So again, as we ingest, as we respirate, and our skin all have defenses against foreign invaders, basically all of that. So again, we're built to kind of deal with that, all right? And we're built to neutralize foreign invaders. This is something called innate immunity, okay? And our innate immune system is not meant to be bypassed. You'll notice I have an image there of a needle. No bueno. No. Again, bypassing our innate immune system needs to be done with extreme care and extreme knowledge of what you're doing. And I would argue we don't do either of those things right now in pharma or in the medical community. Okay, so how does our immune system work? Well, it kind of looks like, and again, there's a blog on this. I get into great detail, an hour. I'll glaze your eyes on the immune system. Go look at blog 2. But basically, the long and the short of it is this, and then we'll get into some details here. But your immune system is like a mobile, so very similar to the situation I just described. Where we're always constantly changing, defending. You're walking over a lead mine, you're not. Now you've kind of got exposure to whatever, and you got to defend against that. But your immune system is always responding and changing to all of this external stimuli. And again, it might be environmental, so things like a lead mine, or it might be diet-based. So again, if you eat something that you don't like, again, that's going to cause your immune system to basically respond. So what you don't want to have happen, though, is that you don't want persistence. Persistence is what gets us in trouble, because if you have persistence, you will develop a new normal around that persistence. And you have to, because that's how we adapt. That's how we evolve. That's how we survive, is this dysbiosis and building a new normal. That's literally called evolution. Okay. But again, let's talk that through, because we're maybe inappropriately disrupting our immune systems and inappropriately responding to that disruption. Perhaps unintentionally, perhaps intentionally. It's up to you really to decide how this looks. Okay, so we've talked about our innate immune system. That's basically this one. So our skin, our respiratory, and our ingestion systems, and they are built to have defenses to defend ourselves from foreign objects. We also have something called adaptive immunity. So what happens if something gets by the Gandalf, right? So we got a good Gandalf, but what happens if something gets by the Gandalf? What happens if you shall not pass and whatever that thing was called passes? Well, now we're in trouble. So you have two different kinds of responses, and this is really cool. One is called Th1 or M1, macrophage 1 immunity. And so what happens in that is really the first time your body is exposed to something, it'll kill it. It's just going to try to kill it. But it's also going to kind of develop a memory of what that thing looked like. And so again, it may try to kill it and not be able to the first time, and that thing may actually cause an infection. But if your body builds a memory to it, and then can build basically, what are they called? Immunoglobulin. Yeah, that stuff. Basically build antibodies. There we go. Antibodies to it. Again, the next time your body sees it, it can attack it in a different way. That's called your Th2 or M2 response. So again, you have to see it first, you build antibodies, and then you're able to attack it in a different way. In an M2 response, you still kind of build killer cells, but you also build these antibodies that will go out and protect your body from infection and sort of attack by whatever's happening. Okay, so this is exactly what they're trying to do with a vaccine, is create this basically immune memory. Okay, so you have an initial response. Again, you're going to attack that just in the way that you attack that. But after you see that thing the first time, you're going to build a protective immunity to it and basically a memory to it. That memory lasts for years, regardless of the science of the last 2 or 3 months. We're still in COVID, by the way, and I'm referring to that. So again, that appears to have changed. Years and years and years of established science really didn't. They're probably just not telling us the truth. Again, when you build memory, when you build a memory, an immune memory to something, years, lasts for years. Best natural immunity is the best thing that you can do. Okay, so how does this work? Well, again, you have that initial response and you build right off, and only mammals do this, by the way. Only mammals do this. They produce an antibody called IgE, all right? So IgE is released during that first kind of sensitivity. And that IgE is what appears to say, okay, I know what that is, and I'm going to remember it for next time. So if you're having an IgE event, you are extremely sensitive to anything that can come in your body. Okay. And this is how you develop, no joke, an allergy, which we'll talk about in detail. But it's also how you develop immune memory. Okay. So this is a good thing. It can be a bad thing, which we'll talk about, but this is a good thing. So you want to be able to develop an immune memory so that, the next time you see COVID-19 or the next time you see that flu or the next time you see, avian flu or whatever it is, that you have a banging good immune response and you have antibodies that will go out and attack that thing so it doesn't hurt you. So this is what we want to have happen. So we want to basically build memory to these foreign objects and foreign substances. But what we don't want to do is build memory to stuff that normally wouldn't hurt us. Okay. So an allergy is a hypersensitivity to something that is natural, that is naturally occurring, that we should not be sensitive to. And allergies are created. Allergies are 100% created. Yeah, let that one sink in. And allergies create inflammation. And allergies create oxidative stress. So again, we're going to talk about when we're really kind of diving into disease, but what causes disease? Well, at the highest level, again, allergies sure cause a lot of distress in your body. All right. But let's talk this through. Okay. So have we always had allergies? Well, the term allergy was first used in 1906. So no, we haven't always had allergies. We used to have something, let's say hay fever, so there's descriptions of hay fever back in the 1800s and things like that, but there were no food allergies. We weren't allergic to food, food's what you eat. You're not allergic to it. There weren't, people didn't die of anaphylactic shock. So again, what is anaphylactic shock? If you have a severe allergic reaction, you will basically die of something called anaphylactic shock. There was nothing called anaphylactic shock until 1906, when a dog was injected with man-of-war venom. And basically what the researchers were trying to do is see if they could build this natural and innate immunity, adaptive immunity to man-of-war venom. And so they injected a little bit in a dog, and the dog was fine. The dog got a little sick and was fine. About 2 months later, they did it again, injected in a dog. The dog got a little sick and then was fine. 2 months after that, they injected in the dog. The dog got anaphylactic shock and died. Again, what did we learn? Not to inject things, but we didn't learn that. We learned about anaphylaxis. And so then they started studying basically this phenomenon that had never been seen before. There was one reported incident of the Pharaoh, and again, I won't say his name right, so MENES. He got stung by a bee. He got injected with bee venom, which caused anaphylactic shock, and apparently he died. But again, they didn't have a word for it. But that's the earliest incidents that anyone could find of something like anaphylactic shock occurring. And again, it really didn't occur unless it was a weird incident like this, unless it bypassed your respiratory immunity, your digestive immunity. Okay. So that's how things, or our skin, but that's how things should get in us. We shouldn't bypass those innate immune systems, because when we do, again, bad things happen. But this is the first time that we began to realize that our immune system had a memory, that we remembered things, that we could defend against those things. And we also learned about allergies and anaphylactic shock. So what causes allergies? It's a hyperimmune state. So it's like your immune system just goes into this hyperimmune state, and anything that you see, whoop, okay, I'm going to be allergic to that. But it's something called IgE. So IgE is released, and this again only happens in mammals, but it appears to prime the allergy response. Okay. So when IgE is released, the body will create a situation where pretty much anything that is an irritant that it's exposed to could become an allergen. All right. So what increases IgE? Vaccines, which we've really all already talked about, but in particular in vaccines, mercury will cause an IgE event. And there's something in Therasol, I think it's called, that's in every vaccine. Aluminum will cause an IgE event. And these are things you don't want to have happen. So low iron, and we'll talk about this in a little bit more, will cause basically your immune system to go into this IgE type response rather than a Th2 or a Th2 type response, rather than a Th1 response. So sometimes the first time your body sees something, if you don't have enough iron, it will go into this hypersensitive state where you'll become allergic to that thing or anything that's an irritant. Inflammation, is basically allergies cause inflammation. I mean, if you think about you're allergic to something and you basically your sinuses inflame, your lungs inflame, and that's what you feel as that congestion. That's literally the physical manifestation and physical feeling of being inflamed. Okay. So that is the core of inflammation. It's fluid, it's all those things. And it, when you're congested, you're highly inflamed. Okay. So is inflammation bad? Yeah. And again, in the food blog, we're going to talk a lot about inflammation because we eat so many inflammatory foods. But inflammation actually causes something called oxidative stress, even though this slide is titled inflammation, and it should be inflammation causes, but they're kind of grouped together because they're closely related. So again, but inflammation causes oxidative stress and causes basically, bad things to happen. Oxidative stress, and again, you can kind of go through the things here that would cause inflammation, kind of cause this situation to happen. But under oxidative stress, a lot of bad things happen. You lose. And again, what is oxidative stress? Here, hold this lead. That's going to cause oxidative stress. A lot of these conditions are going to cause oxidative stress, and it really creates a situation in us where we're weakened. We're weakened because we're dealing with all this stuff that we need to deal with, and it causes weakness in our normal function. It causes weakness in our immune system. So again, because of our environment, and we're really talking about environment here more than we are diet, and we'll talk about diet in the other blog, but we're very weak. We're very susceptible to viruses, to anything that would attack our immune system. And so we really need to get this figured out if we want to, stay around as humans, because we need to evolve past the place where we seem to evolve to with all of our processed food. So anyway, you can kind of look this over. Glutathione, super duper important thing to your liver. It's what protects your liver. GST is a glutathione precursor. GSH, glutathione markers. And you don't want those arrows going down under any circumstances. It leaves your liver unprotected. Okay, so again, a little bit more about inflammation and oxidative stress. So we all should have something called an acute inflammatory response. That's the way you're designed. So if you get hit with a rock, again, bam, that rock is going to cause a trauma. It's going to cause a pain response, which is kind of interesting. What does that mean? Is that how your body understands how bad the trauma is? Probably. But anyway, that's theoretical. But anyway, you're going to have a pain response, and then you're going to have an inflammatory response. So again, your hypothalamus hippocampus is going to understand how bad that trauma is, and it's going to cause an acute inflammatory response, meaning you're going to swell in that area. You're going to bruise in that area. And we want that to happen, boys and girls. And then past that, hypothalamus hippocampus, using the endocannabinoid system, will cue stem cells to be repair cells. You're a blood cell, you're a bone cell, you're a neuro cell, whatever. But basically we'll repair that area, and then hypothalamus hippocampus will make the determination, looking good, looking like it's fixed, deflame the area. And we'll use the endocannabinoid system to deflame the area. So that's acute inflammation. That we want that. That's what protects us from traumas. That's how our body heals. That's how we deal with external things happening to us. So acute inflammation, super duper good. Systemic chronic inflammation, not so good. Not good at all. So again, if you're exposed to lead, if you're exposed to environmental factors, which can cause you harm, again, you're going to be, it might just hurt you a little. It might hurt you a lot. So this is on this slide, these environmental factors that potentially might get us. Oops, there we go. What are they? You know, just something that might cause just a little chronic inflammation. Things like, they're called xenobiotics. So again, if something is not natural, if something doesn't occur in nature, we would call it a xenobiotic. So Tylenol, acetaminophen is a xenobiotic. You can look up what that does to your liver. There are lots of things in around us, let's say, that potentially could cause, you know, small, low-grade chronic inflammation, like your deodorant, like your toothpaste, like your hairspray, like your makeup, like things that you chronically and persistently do. Are we aware of everything in those things that might cause just a little bit of inflammation? And did you know that just a little bit of inflammation will kill us? And is, okay? So again, this is really, we're mainly talking in this blog about xenobiotics. And again, you know, stress can cause basically these things to happen, lack of sleep. So anything that's taking you out of kind of your normal rhythms. But environmental factors absolutely will cause us, you know, can cause us low-grade chronic systematic inflammation, and that's horrible. Again, if you get a little inflamed, you get oxidative stress. The oxidative stress will help you become more inflamed. More inflamed causes more oxidative stress, and you begin to get into this loop. Again, without knowing how to get out of that loop, your mobile will find a new normal around that loop. This is what metabolic syndrome is. This is what a lot of disease states are. Dysbiosis. It's a dysregulation. It's a new normal. It's your body trying to save itself. But we get in these bad loops because we just don't understand this whole process. So again, I'm really talking more about oxidative stress on this slide, although diabetes is highlighted. But again, ROS, the little explosion things on this slide, are reductive oxidative stress. And again, this is causes problems. So you can kind of see, you know, on this slide, all of the different areas that oxidative stress is caused by and will also cause. So if you have mitochondrial dysfunction, you're going to have reductive oxidative stress. If you have too much fructose or sorbitol, you are going to have too much oxidative stress. If you have too much NADPH, and again, that is kind of what fructose does in a different way, you're going to have too much ROS. Methylglycol, too much ROS. Too much ROS, oxidative stress, will cause inflammation, will cause endothelial dysfunction. What that means is basically what can happen, I guess, is in your intestine. As you get inflamed, what happens is your capillaries come apart, and you've got all this funk in your intestines, this bacterial stuff. And again, what happens under inflammation, your capillaries come apart and fluid comes out, and that's how you basically build fluid and inflame. Well, on the right circumstances, stuff can come in, and it appears that that does happen in the gut when your gut is inflamed. And when stuff comes in, you can get a bunch of bacteria and, you know, funk basically in your blood system. And this appears to directly be related to autoimmune disease. So there you go. You don't want the funk in the gut. Elevated glucose, elevated fructose cause oxidative stress. Are you reading your labels? Again, we'll talk about diet in the next one, so I won't go too much into that. So what is this disease cycle that, again, a lot of us appear to be in? We are built to defend ourselves against parasitic infections. So again, that happens to us all the time. Believe it or not, we're eating bugs all the time, and we, grow bugs in response, and we have a good set of bugs that grows in us. We're built to withstand viral infections. So we're built to survive the flu and survive COVID and survive bird flu and survive all these things that are naturally in our environment. I don't know if all those things are naturally occurring or not, but we're built to basically survive things that are naturally occurring in our environment. We're certainly built to survive our food. Again, allergens is on here, but allergens is a rando. They're created, that we're not really built to defend ourselves against them, but we can and do. All of these things, if we're exposed to too much, if we're exposed to bad food, you throw up, right? But if you're exposed to too much bad food, again, your body is going to begin to respond to that in a bad way. If you basically get a virus you've never seen before, you're going to get sick. If you have a parasitic infection, you're going to get sick. When you're sick, if you're basically it causes inflammation, infection and inflammation, which cause oxidative stress. Based on your phenotype, the genetics you were born with, again, you will break depending on your genetics, where you're weakest, where your point of failure is. But just like somebody who's dying, on the top of a mountain, or actually kind of die from COVID the same way, you shut down from the outside in. So, your feet, your major systems are last, right? So your major systems usually are always the most protected and shut down last. But again, how that happens for me is going to be different than how that happens for other people. But it happens, and something's going to happen there. And again, if we're under oxidative stress long enough, you will have a disease state. This is kind of cool. I just wanted to throw this in because we're talking a lot about allergies. So again, I'm talking about really these environmental things that potentially can cause us super duper amounts of problems. And if you're constantly if you're in an immune hyperactive state, and again, you're constantly exposed to things, you're going to have a bunch of allergies. You're going to be chronically inflamed. You're going to be chronically infected. Again, what happens when you get a sinus? You have a sinus thing. We get infected. We not infected, but we inflame. So potentially from allergies, we inflame. If that inflammation stays around long enough, you get a sinus infection, right? So again, things can get chronically worse and worse and worse. But this is kind of cool. So this is measles. So measles does something super duper unique as a disease. Measles wipes out your immune memory. Okay. So everything that you've ever seen as a unit, all of these pathogens that you've kind of responded to, and you built immune memory. So things like COVID or, influenza or, whatever it is, you built this immune memory to, and now you can respond and kind of fight these things off. If you get measles, it's gone. It's all gone. It wipes out your immune memory. It also spikes IgE, which again will make you super duper susceptible to allergens during that time. The interesting thing here, though, and the thing that I want to point out is, when you get a measles vaccine, you get some measles, right? So you're actually getting the measles virus injected in you. And there's only been one study on this, and it wasn't a very big study. It was 10 people, but they did find that the measles vaccine did indeed erase their memory, their immune memory. And they did find that the vaccine did spike IgE. So those are two bad things that we don't want to have happen. And again, we give this vaccine to everyone. Every single child, I think, in the United States is required to have this vaccine. And I know people are refusing them now, which is kind of a good thing. So again, everything that I've been able to look at on vaccines is negative, that you're better off, whatever the thing you're trying to vaccinate against, getting it almost and building immune memory to it. You need to go into getting whatever it is. And again, I'm not saying go out and infect yourself, but, we need to be concerned with our immune system really and build the best immune system that we can. Then we can respond and defend against all of these things that happen. So let's look at allergies. Again, we didn't have allergies before 1906. There wasn't even a word. We certainly didn't have food allergies. So in what world are we allergic to our nutrients? I mean, that is wrong, right? That doesn't fit. But guess what? You know, under these IgE events, if I feed you a grain that has a real stable irritant in it, like prolammin, gluten, you're going to become allergic to that thing. And you can almost create these. You know, I could certainly create a situation in you where I created an allergy. You know, I hope to God that people aren't actually doing that in pharma, but this is happening. So again, let's say you have the MMR vaccine at 18 months. You wipe out all your immune memory. It causes an IgE response, and then mom feeds you whatever baby food it is with gluten in it. Yeah, now you got a gluten allergy. Okay, so that's what happens here. And again, food allergies are out of control on the rise. I mean, out of control on the rise. If you are having a persistent food allergy, your mobile is disrupted. You should not be having a food allergy ever. Okay. So again, this is as bad as hold this lead. Walk around with this piece of lead in your pocket. If you're having chronic, basically allergies, chronic infection, chronic inflammation, you're holding lead. It's as bad as, you know, living on a lead mine, living in a lead mine. You're holding lead. Okay. And we don't realize this right now. It's, oh, I have a cold, or I always get a cold, or I always get allergies this time of year. So another thing that can actually cause this situation, but something that we should all be concerned about, is iron. And again, iron runs within a range. So if you have too much iron, and this is serum, so blood, in your hematocrit, how much iron do you have? So again, if you have an iron deficiency, you will have an oversensitive immune system. You will basically release IgE in exposure to almost anything, and you will become hyperallergic, or can become hyperallergic. And certainly this happens when you're younger rather than older. So it's easier, I would say, to create this situation. Again, another thing that can cause iron deficiency is something called hepcidin. So if you have hepcidin overexpression, that can inhibit the amount of iron that your body will uptake. So again, you have a protein that'll say, whoop, stop uptaking iron. And if you have too much of that, again, that's going to keep your body from uptaking iron. And there's things that can cause you to have too much hepcidin. And again, these all correlate though with something called an atopic allergy. So if you can take your finger and run it down your arm, and you basically get a red mark down your arm, you have an atopic allergy. And that's something that you're basically in a hyperimmune state. Autistic people seem to be almost always in a hyperimmune state. And again, this is not where you want to be. It's not your body has to adapt. Again, autistic people build a whole new gut system as how they adapt. And again, that saves them from dying, really. So what happens if you're overloaded, if you have too much iron? Well, this can cause organ failure. It literally is highly correlated with cancer. So again, you know, I can almost give you cancer by getting you to uptake a bunch of iron, and that's controlled again by hepcidin. So, you know, if you can get hepcidin to express, then you can get your ability to uptake iron to calm down. But this appears to be a hypoimmune state. So kind of your immune system is put to sleep almost, and it doesn't, you know, won't wake up. It won't even wake up when you have cancer. So anyway, how do you build a healthy immune system? So this is the last slide, and I think this is the most important slide. Again, it's diet and environment. So it's that simple. It's what we put in our mouth, and what we breathe in through our respiratory, and what comes into us through our skin, right? So that's how our immune system is built, and that's how our immune system responds. So we're best off, you know, basically building healthy triglycerides. And what's that about? We need to eat omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids in balance. Somewhere about probably, you know, less than 5%, but probably up to 3% should be omega-3, omega-6 fatty acids in balance. Right now in our diet, we eat about 10% of our diet is omega-6 fatty acids, and that's about 20 times too much. We eat, you know, way more omega-6s than omega-3s. And again, we'll talk about that in the diet blog. in a little more detail. We need iron. We need iron, obviously, from the last slide, but we need iron in order to metabolize. We also need zinc. Zinc appears to be a iron regulator also. So again, zinc and iron are pretty tightly related, and they help us. We need them for electrons. So gimme, so we can ionize our oxygen. And we need oxygen, and that comes to us through our respiratory. So again, if we're paying attention to these cofactors, if we're paying attention to our fatty acid intake, then that gives us a really good chance of having a very, very good and healthy immune system. If you want to learn more about what we do, we offer monthly classes on our model of human function. Again, you can find us at newpharma.com. You can find us at truemedics.com. Our focus is to provide you information and education, but at TrueMedics, we will also sell you products. You can find us on YouTube at the channel listed there below. You can always email me at chip@newpharma.com. I talk to people every day. I might suggest that you go into a program that's a little easier for me to deal with everybody. But feel free to email or whatever, ask any questions you like. We'll leave it there. So thank you guys as always, and watch blog 4 on the diet coming up next. Bye.